If you miss a service, you can always catch up later by following us on Twitter or liking us on Facebook, where we post the services every week. You can also download our Casas app straight from the App Store and watch the services from your phone or your tablet.
Yeah, I serve because I believe it's my calling. And I love the people I'm working with, and they encourage me as much as I hope I encourage them.
I think it's a key part of being part of a church family.
For me, serving is life-giving.
Anybody can do it, and you can give somebody a smile, and most likely you'll get one back.
I look forward to Sunday mornings when I do this once a month. I love to do it.
You're able to experience the church as like being your church. When you serve, you're really a part of it, and you're able to see things happen.
It's a realization that God wants us to sometimes be His hands and feet, and to serve others is a tangible way to really have an impact on people's lives.
This is my home, this is my church.
You get to meet the guests first, and you get to help them find their way around. This is a big place to come to.
By giving of my time, or giving of myself, it's such a blessing to me to be able to meet people, on a Sunday morning and say hello and be a friendly face for them.
Well, good morning. Let's all stand together. We've got a great chance to worship God this morning, so put your hands together and sing it out. Your voice, it thunders, the oaks start twisting, the forest sounds with cedars breaking, and the waters see you and start their rising. From the depths a song is rising, and now it's rising from the ground. Holy, 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 holy Lord. The earth is yours and singing. Holy, 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 holy Lord. The earth is yours. The earth is yours. Your voice it thunders, the ground is shaking, the mighty mountains now are trembling. Creation sees you, it starts composing. The fields and trees, they start rejoicing. And now it's rising from the ground. And now it's rising from the ground. Hear us crying out. Hear us crying out. Holy, holy, holy Lord. The earth is yours
hardened hearts begin believing. Redemption's bid is unrelenting. Your love goes on. Your love goes on. Let's sing this together. Carry us. Carry us. Carry us. When the world gives way. Cover us. Cover us. With your endless grace. Love is relentless. Love is relentless. Love is relentless. Love is relentless. Time is up for chasing shadows. You gave the world a light to follow. A hope that shines beyond tomorrow. Your love goes on. Your love goes on. Sing it out. Carry us, carry us. When the world gives way. Cover us with your endless grace. Love is relentless. Love is relentless. Love is relentless. Love is relentless. Tearing through the veil of darkness, breaking every chain, you set us free. Fight for the furthest heart, you gave your life for all to see. Tearing through the veil of darkness, breaking every chain, you set us free. Fighting for the furthest heart, you gave your life. Love is relentless. 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 Love is relentless.
We know from Scripture, it tells us that where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And today, we gather together as a community, as a family, to lift up the name of Jesus, that we are free. We are free indeed by the blood of Jesus. So lift your voices and sing it out.
For we know the truth. Your truth has set us free. In your name alone, we have been released. And you are here with us. And you are here with us. We are slaves no more. Freedom is our hope.
Sing it out. Never looking back, Jesus, you are Lord. We give all to you, and we give all to you. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And where the Spirit of the Lord is, chains are broken, eyes are open. Christ is with us, and Christ is with us. He has set us free. Who the Son is free, he is free indeed. All our sin is gone, we have been redeemed. Jesus paid it all. Jesus paid it all. Lift your voices. When the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, chains are broken, eyes are open. Christ is with us, and Christ is with us. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, chains are broken, eyes are open. Christ is with us. Christ is with us. And open wide the gates of heaven. Fill our hearts as we surrender. Lord, let your presence fall. Lord, let your presence fall. And open wide the gates of heaven. We will worship you forever. Lord, let your presence fall. Lord, let your presence fall. Open wide the gates of heaven. Fill our hearts as we surrender. Lord, let your presence fall. Lord, let your presence fall. Open wide the gates of heaven. We will worship you forever. Lord, let your presence fall. Lord, let your presence fall. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, chains are broken, eyes are open. Christ is with us. Christ is with us. Christ is with us. Christ is with us. You are here, Jesus. Oh, glory to your name. Thank you, God.
Well, go ahead and have a seat. And as they're doing that, ushers, you can go ahead and come forward. Now, before we do go any farther, though, there is an important question for me that I need to ask. How many of you all, anybody here, do the tour and all that cold, wind, rain? Anybody do it? Anybody do it? Right here? Anybody else? Too? All right, very good. We have a smattering. So to you, at least you two, I say, you guys are heroes. You're heroes. And to everybody else, I say, you all have common sense. So it's a win-win for everybody. I love bicycling. In the back of your seats, you'll see that we have some blue cards, and these are very special cards. If you're our first-time guest here, we want to say welcome and thank you for joining us. We're just incredibly excited and thrilled that you've decided to spend your Sunday morning with us, and we'd like to know a little bit about you. So if you're a first-time guest, go ahead and grab this blue card and fill it out. And if you are a second-time guest, maybe you've come one time before, but this is your second time, we've decided you're so nice that we'd like to hear from you twice. And in doing so, we're asking you to fill this out again, and it lets us know that you came back and just kind of continues to fill us in on who's coming and joining us in our services. And for either guest, first or second, as the offering plate gets passed, go ahead and just put the blue card in the offering plate, and that's how we'll go ahead and collect it. Let's pause just real quick and say, just have a moment of prayer. Dear God, we thank you for this morning. We thank you for just the change in weather and season that you brought this week, and just how much it reminds us that you are just a wonderful creator and a creator with a great sense of creativity and beauty. And we ask now that you be here this morning, be present with us, speak to us, encounter us. And we thank you for the gifts which we're about to collect. We ask that you allow us to take these gifts that come to us and let us turn them back into gifts and make us a gift to the community of Tucson and the community that surrounds us. In your name, amen. All right, as they're taking the offering, I'd like to point your thoughts and memories to something. I don't know if you were walking in, if you saw the Christmas stuff already up. Did you all see that? Now, generally, I'm kind of a Scrooge, and I tend to believe that Christmas shouldn't happen until after Thanksgiving. If the calendar says it, everyone else should say it too. But I'm going to make an exception. I'm actually because Christmas Eve is coming, and the Christmas Eve that is planned for this year here at Cassis is just going to be so exceptional, such an experience, and I say let's just get it started right now. And so that's why we've thrown them up there. We're bringing it early because we're going to need all this time to truly experience it. It's going to be a wonderful time. And I'm going to give you a teaser, a taste, if you will, because I can't tell you everything. But I'm going to tell you, we're going to have a Cassis Christmas tree that we put out in the courtyard, and it's not going to be a Charlie Brown tree. Oh, no. It's a redwood. I'm going to let that sink in. A redwood. It's going to be a fairly large tree, somewhere between Charlie Brown and redwood, and it's going to serve a very special purpose. What we're inviting everybody in our congregation to do is we know that you all come and attend here and call this your home, and so we're going to, here in the coming weeks, start providing some Christmas ornaments for each family. And if you so choose, you can kind of decorate those and you make them uniquely yours, and then hang them on that tree. And so that tree becomes a physical representation of all the families here at Cassis, all the people who call this place home. And if people who walk in on campus who have never been here before, when they see that tree, they can see now what it looks like to be here at Cassis. They can see who we are. And then that's going to lead up into the Christmas Eve service. And the Christmas Eve service, as I've said, I can't say it enough, it's going to be just this wonderful experience that I can't wait to share with everybody. And it's got, the way that it's been planned out and the way that it's going to happen is that there's going to be something in it for everybody. And that's one of the things that we're most excited about. And one of those things, when you invite visitors, because I know you're already thinking about who's going to come and join me for Christmas Eve, is that we're going to have some ornaments that night. So that anybody who's a visitor, anybody who's visiting us for the first time or the second time, but is a guest, we're going to offer them a chance to hang their ornament on that tree as well. And so it's a chance to invite them to become a part of this community, to say, everyone is welcome here. We want you to come be a part and call this place home. And so it's going to be a really cool experience and a really cool thing to kind of participate in and celebrate. Now, as I said, Thanksgiving is coming. I know that many of us gather together with our families at Thanksgiving, and we get around the tables and we kind of plan, what are we going to do over the holidays, and you make your family plans. And so I just want to let you know just something very practical. Right now, we are having services on Christmas Eve, 3, 5, and 7. And so as you guys are gathered around the Thanksgiving table enjoying all your wonderful feasts, maybe as you start to make plans, know that that's when it's happening. So you guys can start working with whoever you need to talk to make sure that we just have a wonderful time and that everybody who needs to be here is here. And so again, I want to say, you're going to hear more about it in the coming weeks, but let me be the first to invite you from the bottom of my heart how excited I am to be able to share Christmas Eve with you all. And let me be the first to invite you all and your guests to join us for that.
morning. How are y'all doing? Hopefully everybody's good. Someone needs to tell Seth that people aren't real happy when you cut down redwoods. So there'll be a large tree, it won't be a redwood, let's keep it honest. Today we begin a brand new series here called Shape. We're going to be looking at the life of a man named Jacob from the book of Genesis, and ultimately seeing all of the many things that he goes through, that some of them terrible, some of them good, that ultimately shape him into a man that's one day named Israel. It's a really powerful story. And as we begin this morning, I want to start with a story. A couple of weeks ago, I was having a conversation with my wife at the kitchen counter, both kind of standing there, and from the background, my 2-year-old daughter begins yelling, "Excuse me, excuse me, excuse me, excuse me, excuse me." Like I could continue and you'd get the feel. Do you know what I mean? Like that's how this is. We've taught her not to say mom, mom, dad, dad, and so I don't know which is better. We're still kind of stuck in that moment. But she does this, and so finally you get to that breaking point where you're just like, 1 second, and you turn, you go, "Yes," and my daughter's name is Harmony. "Yes, Harmony?" And she looks at me and says, "Dad, look at my dance." And she starts spinning around in circles, kind of like Father Abraham style, doing this marching thing until she gets dizzy and falls on the ground. And then she rolls over and her head pops up and her eyes meet mine. She looks at me as if to just waiting for my response, my reaction. And I say, "Wow, that was some crazy dancing, good job." And then I turn and I start talking to my wife again, but I don't get 2 seconds into it before she says, "Hey, Dad, look at me, look at me, look at me." And so I turn, I go, "Yeah," and she says, starts dancing again. She starts jumping around and twirling, shaking her body convulsively like a 2-year-old would, falls on the ground, rolls over, and then looks up again, her eyes meeting mine, waiting my response. And I said, "Wow, that's really good dancing." I lied, it wasn't, but I'll have to deal with that later. And all of a sudden, my daughter, sorry, it's just honest, my daughter, Felicity, who's 4, comes running into the room because she has heard this, and she goes, "Dad, look at my dance." And she starts twirling around the living room like a ballerina. And I said, "Wow, you've really gotten good at this." And then Harmony, my younger one, steps in front of her and says, "Look at me." And then this moment never really ends. They just keep saying, "Look at me, look at me." They start shouting over the top of one another, stepping in front of one another again and again, all hoping that either my wife or myself might see them and applaud their next performance. Because the truth of the matter is, don't get me wrong, they're cute and it's adorable and fun and I love their crazy dancing, but they just want to be seen. They want to feel acknowledged, to feel celebrated, to feel, special. And I think at its core, they long to feel significant. And in truth, we all do, don't we? Every human being has a longing for significance. Every single one of us longs to be seen, longs to be celebrated, acknowledged, in this particular way. We all have a deep longing for significance, and so much like my daughters, we dance. We still dance. And we dance with our very lives. With each accomplishment, each promotion, each accolade, each new possession that we get, it's as though we get all of this stuff and we garner it and we work hard for it, we strive, as though to say to the world around us, "Look at me, look at me." And it never fails that with each new, accomplishment, accolade, with each new, thing that we get, each new possession that we hold in our hands, it's like we suddenly look up to the people that are surveying our life, the people that view us, and we find ourselves wondering, we're waiting for their response. We find ourselves wondering, does anybody really see me? Does anybody really see you? You see, we all have a deep longing for significance. Ultimately, it's a longing to be loved. I talked with a high school boy a while ago, and it was report card time. His report card came out. He'd worked so hard all semester and managed to pull straight A's, which I think is quite the accomplishment. And he was so excited about this. He hadn't even been home yet, and he goes home to tell his parents. And he gets home and gives his mom and dad the report card, and they care a lot about this, and so they open it up, and they stand there, and the very first words that his dad says, his dad looks at him and says, "So what happened with the A-?" It's like the air gets sucked out of the room, and the boy kind of slinks down, and you see he danced and nobody'd seen. There's a woman in her mid-40s that, she has a good marriage, but she has had to work at it. She's had to work hard. It hasn't always been easy. They've overcome a lot, but she's done it. She's gotten there and still working. She's got 3 kids, and her desire is to raise them correctly, and she's invested so much time and energy and effort into this, pours her very being into raising them, and lo and behold, her kids are even becoming kind of responsible young adults. Sure, they make mistakes, but it's the right thing, and at times when the financial burden of the households become a little stressful, she's even gone out and gotten a part-time job to try to help alleviate some of that, and yet the holiday season comes, and she finds herself at a table with her parents, going back home to visit, and suddenly she's reminded of all the potential she never lived up to, of the career she could have had but never did, of the life she was supposed to have but she settled for this one. And there's a part of her that sinks because you see she's danced and nobody sees. We all have a longing for significance, and in its deepest of forms, it's a longing to be loved. In the book of Genesis, chapter 25, there's a woman named Rebekah, and Rebekah's married to a man named Isaac. Isaac's the son of Abraham, the great patriarch of the Hebrew nation. And at one time, this couple, Rebekah and Isaac, finds themselves pregnant, and she's about to deliver twins. And so the moment arrives, and they're excited, and the first twin is brought into the world. He's born first, and as he emerges, they name him Esau, and he is the firstborn. And you have to understand, in this culture, it is so deeply significant. So deeply significant. And the reason why is the firstborn was the one that carried on kind of the family name. He's the one that carried on the power and the wealth and the authority really of that family. He had both blessing and birthright. Both of these things existed simply because he was the firstborn son. His name was Esau, born with such significance. But his brother wasn't, long behind him. In fact, as they kind of pull Esau out, there's his brother who is literally clutching Esau's heel. And they named him Jacob, which quite literally means he who rides on the heels of another. And Jacob is brought into the world, the second twin, the youngest. And I think that name was kind of prophetic for the kind of life that he was going to live. Because this idea of riding on someone else's heels never really goes away. In fact, we see in chapter 25, verse 27, it says, "When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man, dwelling in tents. And Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob." See, we have a story of 2 boys. One born with deep significance is the firstborn. One born with blessing and with birthright. One who is the outdoorsman, the man's man, the one whom his father loves. And then you have the other one who stays indoors and is really kind of a mama's boy. You have 2 boys. You have one who has the firstborn birthright and all of his talents, and you have the other one who lives in the shadow of his older brother. You have a boy named Jacob who dances and longs to be seen by his father, but his father never really does. And we see this begin to play out in his life because Jacob starts to long for more. Jacob starts to long for things that ultimately, his dad might look at him and say, "I see you," because we all have a deep longing for significance. We all have a hunger to be loved in that way in the deepest part of who we are. And Jacob longs for this from his father, but he can never quite pull it off. And so you have to ask the question, if you long for this, if you do the song and dance all the time, but the only person your father ever sees is your brother Esau, what do? Well, you start to think to yourself, maybe if I had what Esau had, but he doesn't possess the talents or the skills or the things that made Isaac love Esau, but maybe he can possess something else. And so he begins to try to actually take from Esau what belongs to Esau as the firstborn. And so Jacob, through a matter of coercion, finds his brother in kind of an opportune moment and convinces his brother, and I'm going to argue even manipulates his brother into giving him, into trading him away his birthright, half of what really made you significant as a firstborn son. And Esau does it, and suddenly Jacob has it. He has part of what made Esau so deeply significant. He has part of what made Esau, in his head, the child whom Isaac loved, and he holds it in his hand. And I wonder if they thought in that moment, much like I would have thought, maybe now my father will finally see me. Maybe now the deep hunger and the longing for significance that I have will finally be answered because I have the birthright of the firstborn. I've risen to this. Look at me. Look at me. And it never really happens. It never really comes through. I imagine that was a grave disappointment, and we know it doesn't really happen because eventually Isaac is described as an older man. In fact, an old man who's losing his eyesight and begins to ponder death. And Isaac, as he's pondering the fact that he's not going to be around that much longer, he says, what I need to do is bless Esau, my firstborn son, to give him that blessing that's rightfully his before I die. And so he calls Esau in, and he says, I want you to go and I want you to hunt me some game and bring it back and cook it just the way I like it, the way that all the things I love you for, Esau, and go do that, and I want to bless you. And Rebekah, Jacob's mom, hears of this. She gets wind of this, and she even enters into this kind of like brokenness that Jacob experiences too, this longing that he has. Remember, she loved him. Sometimes love makes you do crazy, weird things. Sometimes love makes you do broken things. And she says to him, your brother's going to be, have his blessing. Your father's going to give that. Maybe you can pretend to be Esau, sneak in there and take it. And so Jacob, now a grown man, dresses up like his brother. And his brother Esau was apparently weirdly hairy, to the point where they had to kind of put goat hair on his hands, back of his hands and on his neck, because his brother was a really hairy guy. And so you get the impression that Jacob steps into his father's room and his father can't see, and his father looks up and says, who's there? And Jacob walks over to the side of the bed, and his dad feels the backs of his hands and feels the backs of his neck, and he says, is this really my son Esau? Is this you? I bet you everything in Jacob in that moment longed to say, no, it's me, Jacob, but I love you, and I just want to be seen. I have a longing for significance, and I've been waiting to hear something from you forever, but he doesn't. And in a moment of brokenness, he pretends to be Esau. Longing so much to feel what it's like to be chosen, to feel what it's like to be seen, to feel what it's like to be blessed. He pretends to be his brother, and his father sees this, and I imagine the words were painful when Jacob says, no, it's me, Esau, a bold-faced lie. And then Jacob's father, Isaac, blesses him, bestows this blessing, and now Jacob's taken everything that made Esau significant as a firstborn child. Jacob has literally manipulated his way, coerced his way into receiving the birthright, and now he is cheated and stolen the blessing. As if to say, everything that Esau has, I now have, Dad. And he dances, look at me, look at me. But his father never really sees. It doesn't really happen. In fact, the only way he was able to experience it was to pretend to be somebody else, which had to be so hard. And so he leaves, and Esau comes back, and we get the impression, that Esau and Isaac piece two and two together pretty quickly, and they soon realize that Jacob had deceived them, and that's where we find ourselves in Genesis chapter 27. Excuse me. Chapter 27, verse 34. As soon as Esau heard the words of his father, he cried out with an exceedingly great and bitter cry and said this to his father, bless me, even me also, O my father. But he, Isaac, said, your brother came deceitfully, and he has taken away your blessing. Quite literally, Isaac says, your brother, as a deceiver, came into the room and stole this from you. When we live out of our brokenness, we only end up creating more brokenness. Often the very thing that we're struggling with, that we hate about ourselves, we end up creating in others. And you see, Esau comes home, and he finds himself suddenly robbed of not only his birthright, but also his blessing, all of the significance that he felt like he was born with. And what you hear with his cry here is, Dad, look at me, make me significant too. Is there nothing left? And Isaac says, I'm sorry, what's been done is done. It's sad. It really is. And now Jacob has to flee. See, he can't stay there. Esau hates him and actually wants to kill him. So Jacob's mother and father go to him and say, you've got to get out of here until your brother's anger can kind of die down, because it burns against you. And so you have got to leave. And they send him away to go in search of his uncle Laban's land, where ultimately they tell him, while you're there, go there for a few days, let this quiet down, and while you're there, look for a wife. And so Jacob now leaves. And you have the boy who danced that nobody saw. The boy who longs to be seen by his father now isn't even in the home. Now he's forced to walk away. And as he journeys away from his household, how broken is that the one thing he longs for is the very thing he takes step after step after step away from? Because how is his father supposed to see him if he's not even there? And so Jacob sets off on this journey. And it's not long. He goes to sleep one night, and God appears to him in a dream. And a lot happens in this dream, but the short and sweet of it is this. God looks at Jacob and essentially reveals himself to him and says, I am the God of your father, I am the God of your grandfather, and I want to be your God. And he says this, I choose you. I bless you. I want to bless you. I want to make your descendants as numerous as the dust of the ground, uncountable. And Jacob, furthermore, in choosing you, one of your descendants will come to bless the entire world. I want to reach the world through you, Jacob. You are significant. You are worthy because I, God, choose you. The most powerful being in the universe shows up and he recognizes Jacob. And Jacob receives a blessing that he doesn't have to pretend to be someone else to receive. And you think to yourself, wow, that is a defining moment. That is a moment that must have been like a breath of fresh air to his very soul. That must have impacted him in the deepest of ways. And it doesn't. In fact, Jacob misses it entirely. But you know, we would too. And some of us in this room do miss it entirely. Because sometimes we miss the beauty of what's before us right here, right now, because we're so entrenched in the brokenness of our past. We still just can't let go of this thing to see the glory and the beauty, the answer that exists right before us. Jacob misses it, and we see this. Excuse me, in chapter 28, starting at verse 20. Then Jacob made a vow saying, so one, Jacob acknowledges, he says, surely you are God, and this is a holy place, and he affirms all that, but this is where we see his heart. This is where we see where he's really at. Verse 20, then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me, and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, pause there. What he says is, God, if you're with me, then you'll take care of my basic of needs, you'll give me food to eat, you'll put clothing on my back, you'll make sure that I'm okay, and then it says, so that, it's all going to be about this next purpose, it's all for this next thing. God, if you'll do all of that stuff so that I can achieve the desire of my heart, which is right here in verse 21, so that I come again to my Father's house in peace. Then the Lord shall be my God. And he misses it. The God of the universe goes to Jacob and essentially says, I want to bless you. I choose you. I recognize you. I give you blessing because of who you are, Jacob. I choose you. And he says, that all sounds great. And I know you're God, I'm sure, kind of like that. But you don't understand. I've been doing a dance my whole life back home. And I'm not done doing it yet because my father still doesn't see me. Because I still have this longing, this hunger for acceptance, this hunger for significance, to be loved in the deepest part of who I am, and I'm not done dancing yet. I've got to go back home, God. And so if you can take me there, if you can give me the desire of my heart, then you'll be my God. He misses it. Still clinging to this. And so Jacob wakes up the next day and continues on. Eventually he comes to the land of his uncle Laban. And Laban rushes out to greet him, and what he finds, what he encounters, is not like kind of this wonderful, happy moment. Laban, hugs him and warmly sees him, but ultimately what he sees is the youngest son, the broken son, the son who's deceived and stole and cheated and all of this stuff that is now looking for shelter. This isn't a warm moment. This isn't like this amazing opportunity where it's like family has come home. He comes out and he recognizes Jacob in this and suddenly realizes, you know what, this isn't going to be about royal treatment. He takes Jacob in, but he puts him to work. This isn't going to be a stay at the Hilton. You're going to work for it if you're going to be here. And so Jacob works for a month, it says, and then finally Laban comes to him, and I think Laban had a plan, which we're going to see unfold, and I think he had a plan all along. Genesis chapter 29, beginning at verse 15. Laban said to Jacob, because you are my kinsman, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me what your wages shall be. And now Laban had 2 daughters, and the name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. And Laban said, it's better that I give her to you than that I should give her to any other man, so stay with me. This is fascinating. This is so fascinating to me, and here's why. Here's why. 1, Laban goes to Jacob and says, look, are you really going to work for me for free? And remember, I think Laban kind of has a plan. And between Laban's request, his question, and Jacob's answer fall 2 verses. And these 2 verses are deeply, deeply significant. We're told this, that Laban had 2 daughters. One's name was Rachel, and the other's name was Leah. That Rachel was the younger sister, and that she was beautiful. She was attractive. It says she was beautiful in both form and appearance. She was sexually desirable. People wanted her. They wanted to be with her. That's who she was. And then you contrast that with Leah, who is described as having weak eyes. No, we don't really know the full extent of what that means. She could have had a deformity or something like that, but the point is within this is that you have two sisters that are juxtaposed with one another, and it's a contrast. And what you have here is Rachel, the sister everyone sees, the sister everyone chooses, the sister everyone loves, the sister everyone wants, contrasted with Leah, the ugly sister, the sister no one sees, the sister no one wants, the sister who is forgotten and left behind, who lives in her younger sister's shadow. Strangely, it sounds a lot like Jacob, doesn't it? The story continues, and Jacob says this. This is part of what I think is so fascinating. I love Rachel. Remember, it says Jacob loved Rachel. And I think when it uses the word love there, I think that's a bit of an understatement as far as we culturally would read that. It's not just that Jacob was, he really liked her, that Jacob loved her, that this was warm and fuzzy. No, he is a man obsessed. He is a man who must have Rachel. He loved Rachel. He desires Rachel. And if you don't believe me, allow me to unfold why I believe this here. And it's this. First, he goes to Laban. He says, Jacob loved Rachel. He says, in order to have Rachel as my wife, that's what I want. I will work for you for 7 years. Now, at that time, if you were a groom, you paid a bride price, to get married, and you gave that to the bride's parents. And the average bride price, this was totally a normal and acceptable thing, was somewhere around 50 shekels. Somewhere around 50 shekels, which was a really good price. That was a good thing. And so when Jacob says he's willing to work 7 years, what you have to understand is that the average pay of a day laborer was about 1.5 shekels per day. And so when he says, I'm willing to work 7 years, he's saying, I'm willing to pay 2.5 times what any sane human being would pay for her. I'm willing to pay 2.5 times what anyone would normally give to her. And what he's declaring in this is, I will do anything to have her. This offer is extravagant. This offer is ridiculous. It's saying, I'll do anything. I must have Rachel. He desires her. And if you're still not convinced, I want you to think back to the chapter before where God came to Jacob and said, I choose you and I'm going to bless you and I want to be your God and I'll be with you. And what did Jacob say? To the God of the universe, who he encounters. That all sounds good, but I just want to go back home. I just want to go see my father again. He's consumed with going home, but what do we see now, just 1 chapter later, after he meets Rachel, after he sees Rachel? I'll work for 7 years for her. He's forgotten about home. He's forgotten about all the song and dance he's been doing his whole life. And now he's taken all of that longing for meaning, all of that longing for significance in the deepest part of who he is, and he's picked that thing up and he's taken it away from his father and he's placed it upon Rachel. And it's basically, if he could just have Rachel, maybe now someone will see him. Maybe now he won't have to do this song and dance anymore because she'll see him. Maybe she will be the answer to the longing that is so deep within me. And are you and I so different? Those of us who've been young and in love, or even young and married, you meet that other person and you find yourself feeling alive. We even quote movies like Jerry Maguire, you complete me. And then 3 years go by and you're like, sort of. And then 6 years go by and you're like, whoa, a little bit. And then 10 and you're just like, I don't know what we were talking about. You laugh, but it is true. We place all of our longing for significance, all of our longing for love on that other person. And this is what Jacob does. He now gives it to Rachel. And that's part of what makes this next moment so sad, really. Oh, and this. Going on, verse 20. I know there's some of you in here, we've heard this sermon before where it's like, this is a romantic story. And so ladies, you got to find a guy who's willing to work 7 years for you because you're valuable. Let me affirm, you're valuable. If you find a guy who's willing to work 7 years for you, it's an obsession. Run away. And let me illustrate. Verse 20. So Jacob, here's the part that you're all going to your romantics are all going to breathe heavy on. You're going to love this. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of the love he had for her. Right? Everybody takes a deep breath, and love is in the air, and it's romantic, and allow me to stomp on that. Verse 21, so Jacob's worked his 7 years, goes to her dad. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife that I may go into her, for my time is completed. Here's the paraphrase. I have worked for her. I have bought her. I want her now. Give her to me so that I can have sex with her. To her dad. So romantic. Seriously. He is a man consumed. He is a man filled with desire. He is a man obsessed. And we see this, verse 22. So Laban gathered together all the people of the place and made a feast. Laban throws together a makeshift wedding. This wouldn't have even been the way they would have had a wedding back then. Jacob's family doesn't even attend. They're not even invited. In fact, they pull together just the people in that place and they put together a feast. We're going to pull this off. Why? Because Jacob has to have Rachel. He has to. Verse 23. But in the evening, he, Laban, took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. Notice, Leah, not Rachel. Verse 25, and in the morning, behold, it was Leah. Jacob, after 7 years of work, after all that longing, after, Rachel is my answer, she is my way out, finally has his wedding night. And his wedding custom would have been, there would have been a lot of drinking and whatnot throughout the day. And then you have a culture without electricity and a dark tent in the middle of the night. And you have Jacob who's there waiting for his bride. And Laban kind of ushers Leah over and pushes her through the door. And Jacob that night goes to bed with someone whom he believes is Rachel. And he may have even said her name. And he wakes up in the morning and behold, it's Leah. This is tragic. It really is for two reasons. One, for Jacob. We say, oh, poor Jacob. He worked for 7 years, and how could this happen? And I get that's a terrible thing, and that morning must have been such a shock and horror to him as far as what just happened, and he'd been duped. But also for Leah. You see, Leah's the girl that no one chooses. Leah's the ugly sister that nobody wanted. Leah's the one that probably couldn't get married because no one chose her, no one desired her. And Leah, in a moment where she desires to be chosen, desires to be loved, has that deep longing, just like you, just like me, for significance, to feel that in that moment, steps into a dark tent and sleeps with Jacob. This is now her wedding night, mind you. This is her wedding night, and she has to hear someone else's name and pretend to be somebody else just to feel what it's like to experience love, just to feel what it's like to experience being chosen. How sad is this story? And in the morning, behold, it's Leah. Because the sun always comes up and shines on the truth of whatever it is we're experiencing. And Jacob's enraged. He's enraged. And he says, what is this you have done to me? He says, did I not serve with you? He goes to Laban. What is this you have done to me? Did I not serve with you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me? Why then have you deceived me? What's fascinating here is that the word that Jacob uses for deceived, he looks at Laban and says, why did you come as a deceiver in this way? Is the very same word that Isaac had used to describe Jacob when he stole his brother's blessing. And I think this is the beginning of where Jacob comes to the end of himself, where he starts to become undone in this moment. And here's why. Think about this. Jacob stepped into his father's room, who his father could not see, longing so much for that sense of significance to be seen finally. The boy who danced steps into his father's room and pretends to be his brother just to experience that moment, just to have that blessing, to finally be seen. Leah steps into a dark tent where Jacob can't see. And she pretends to be Rachel, her sister, whom she's lived in the shadow of her whole life, just to feel what it's like to be loved, to be chosen. We all have a longing for significance, and I think that in this moment, Jacob begins to unravel because it's him. It's him. And if he's not there yet, this next comment was like a knife to his chest. This next comment would have opened up a wound in the deepest part of who he was, and I believe it's in this moment that he becomes undone fully. It says, so Jacob says, why did you deceive me? And Laban says, verse 26, it is not so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Here's what's said. This is why this is so intense. Imagine this. Laban looks at Jacob. It says, around here, it's not our custom to prefer the younger over the firstborn, Jacob. You can't just steal. You can't just coerce. You can't just manipulate. You can't just work and get whatever it is that you want. Around here, Jacob, the younger is the younger and the older is the older, and there's nothing that you can do about it. It's not our custom here. And you have Jacob, who has been dancing before his father his entire life, longing to be seen, and he's done crazy things, and he's pretended and just forced himself into all kinds of brokenness and all kinds of stuff. And I think that in that moment, Jacob's wound, in the deepest part of who he is, has been punched, and he just has the wind knocked out of him. He comes undone as a human being, and I think it was his end as far as this whole situation goes, and here's why. Because he had been wronged. This was atrocious. This was ridiculous that they should cheat him in this way. And Laban looks to him and says, look, you can marry Leah this week, and then we'll have another wedding next week, and you can have Rachel right now. You'll have her next week, but you're going to work for me another 7 years. And we don't hear a single contest. We don't hear a single argument against this from Jacob. He just takes it. 7 more years? That's ridiculous. That's preposterous. That's almost disgusting in terms of what that is. How could you? And he just does it. It says, and Jacob fulfilled this, and he married Leah, and he married Rachel. And that's how it plays out. You see, this is the story of how Jacob came to marry 2 sisters. It's sad, isn't it? It's so broken. It really is. And so I want to ask you, what do we do with this? I mean, is this just a narrative, a story, like a full story that we're supposed to just kind of, feel our way through and ultimately say, well, wow, that's just really terrible? Are we supposed to just mourn with it and have remorse over it? What does this mean for us? And I believe that there is a message that's being declared loud and clear through and through over the course of all of these really 5 chapters that we've just walked through, and it's this. There is no human being who is strong enough to carry the weight of your longing for significance. There is no human being who is strong enough to carry the weight of your longing for significance. What if Isaac had pulled Jacob in at one moment and given him a hug and said, look, I love you, Jacob. And you're my son, and you're not the firstborn, but I love you too, and you're unique and all this stuff. Now, that would have been a healing kind of moment. That would have been a beautiful thing, but I can promise you it would not have answered the longing that was deep within Jacob. He still would have hungered. He still would have danced. And what if that night Rachel had been the person who'd stepped into the tent? Rachel, who he just had to have, I'm sure they would have had some joy and maybe a happy marriage initially, and they'd celebrate in some things, but it would only be a matter of time before the weight of his significance became too much for her to bear and she started to drop it. It would not answer the longing in the deepest part of who he was. And here's why. Your parents, some of us have had amazing parents who saw us, who were there for us and lavished us with all kinds of compliments and support and things. Others of us had parents that never saw us, parents who were absent. Some of you have had great parents, and some of you have had terrible parents. But here's the truth. It doesn't matter how great your parents were. Even they are not strong enough to carry the weight of your significance. They desire to, they love you, they'll try, but they're going to drop it every single time. No human being strong enough to carry that. And some of us now have entered into marriages, or we have somebody we're dating, and we put so much hope and all this stuff on that. And I want to tell you, your spouse, the person that you're dating, the person you're attracted to, they are not strong enough to carry the weight of your longing for significance. They'll love you, they'll try, but they're going to drop it at some point. This is what happened in my marriage. 2 years into being married, my wife and I got a phone call in the middle of the night, and we answered it. And on the other end of the line, a voice said, your dad has died, to my wife. Her father passed away. And it was like getting punched in the stomach. We didn't see it coming. It was so unexpected. We didn't know what to do with it. I started to grieve, but my wife went full into grieving. And she, grief is so complex and so personal, and she was in this place, and it lasted, continued this way the better part of a year. And you have to understand, we had been married and had placed our longing for significance on one another. That she'd meet these needs in me and I'd meet these needs in her, and that's how this whole thing was supposed to work. And yet in this moment, in her deepest of needs, she's looking at me, wanting me to see her, wanting me to enter into this with her, and I just couldn't get there. It's like I'd sit and I'd strain my eyes and I'd focus and try so hard to see where she was at, but I could never see far enough. I could never see deep enough, and she knew it. In fact, nobody could. We struggled through this. It was a hard time. It was about a year later that finally Amber came to me one day in all of the wisdom that I'm not sure she even is aware she possesses, and said, Ryan, I think that I've been wanting you to provide something for me that only God can. And I nodded my head like I knew what she was talking about. It took me years to figure that out in my own life. You see, this is what happens in Leah's marriage with Jacob as it goes forward. God sees that Leah is, hurting and broken in this, and that she so longs for the love of Jacob. And God actually, minister. He's a merciful God, meets her in that place and allows her to start producing children. And you have to understand, Leah in this time becomes pregnant with what will be Jacob's firstborn son. And do you remember the significance of this, the weight of that? And Leah says to herself, surely now my husband will finally love me. Surely now Jacob will love me. And as she goes to name this child, and consequently each child after this, she names them after what she secretly longs to experience with Jacob. And so she has her first child, and she says, and we will name him Reuben, which means to be seen, as if to say, maybe now Jacob will finally see me. But he doesn't. She names the second child Simeon. She's pregnant again. She says, maybe now my husband will love me, and she names him Simeon, which means to be heard. Maybe now Jacob will finally hear me. But he doesn't. So she has a third child. Maybe this time Jacob will love me, and she names him Levi, which means to be attached. Maybe now Jacob will finally be attached to me, but he isn't. She keeps entrusting the weight of her longing for significance into his hands, and he just keeps dropping it because Jacob is barely strong enough to carry his own existence, and he's failing with her left and right. He just can't do it. No human being could. And this is where we are sometimes, isn't it? Some of you have been dancing your whole lives hoping to be seen, and no one ever does. Some of you have significant people in your lives that have seen just enough of you to know what you aren't, or rather what you should be. And so you live your life loud, whether through rebellion or accomplishment, hoping that someone will finally look at you, that someone will finally see you, to declare you worthy, to choose you, that you might be blessed. And it just never happens. It's never enough. And your life is like this endless hunger that's never satiated. And you just keep trying and trying and fighting, and it doesn't work. What do we do? And this is where we come to the beautiful moment of redemption in this story. This is where God, in all of his goodness and all of his grace, shines in on this in a way that is so profoundly beautiful that it changes a life. And we don't find redemption through Jacob in this moment. I want to invite you back to the next couple of weeks. We're going to see how he continues on in this story and unfolds to something great. But today, where we see that redemption is with Leah. And here's why. Because she becomes pregnant a fourth time. And she goes to have this child, and she holds him, and she names him Judah. You know what Judah means? To praise. And Leah says, this time, as if to say, this time is going to be different. This time something has changed. This time everything is different. She says, this time I will praise the Lord. You see, the girl that nobody wanted, the girl that nobody chose, the girl that was always overlooked, the girl who lived in her sister's shadow, the girl who has been dancing her whole life hoping to be seen by somebody but always being overlooked, finally stands in a place where she says, there is a God who loves me. There is a God who chooses me. There is a God who has blessed me. There is a God who has seen me all along. And it's as though Leah, with her entire life in this moment, declares, I do not have to dance to be seen, but rather there is a God who has seen me. And so I will lift my voice in praise, and I will dance for joy because everything has changed. And the hunger that she has longed for, the hunger for significance in the deepest part of who she was, that she's been entrusting, that Jacob could never hold, that he just kept dropping, she finally places it in the hands of a God who is big enough to carry it. And he does, and he declares her worthy. And that's you. It's us. We all have a longing for significance. We all have a longing to be loved in the deepest of senses. And I want to tell you, for those of you that have spent your life dancing, for those of you that keep pushing through accomplishment and award and accolade and possession and all of these things, hoping to feel that satisfied, and it never does. To those of you who find yourself longing even so far as to manipulate and live out of your brokenness and pretend just to try to get what it's like to feel chosen, to feel loved, I want to tell you, there's a God who has seen you all along. There's a God who chooses you. There's a God who wants to bless you. And you talk about significance, you talk about value. Jacob worked for 7 years for Rachel, and it was an obscene amount that he was willing to pay, and it declared that he had to have her. He was a man obsessed. God looks at you, and in God's eyes, you are worth Jesus to him.
Not 7 years, not 14 years, himself, his very son. You're worth the most prized possession in the world. It is obscene. It is ridiculous. There's no reason that should ever happen, and yet the God of the universe chooses you. He sees you. He loves you, and Jesus enters this world that you might have hope and reside in it to the fullest. And he enters this world and he dies for your brokenness, the longing, the hunger that exists within you, all of it, takes it upon himself and does away with it, and he rises again to say there is a second chance and there is newness and there is hope because I see you, because he chooses you, loves you, blesses you simply because you're you, and he loves you in all that he is. You don't have to dance. You can praise. You can celebrate. I want to end this service actually with a song. And the words to the chorus of the song are, I will bring praise. And I want to challenge you this morning that is in a moment we're going to go to stand to sing. May you not stand to be seen by God or by anyone else. May you not sing to be heard by God or anyone else. But ultimately, in the fullness of all that God has created you to be, may you stand and may you truly praise, because there is a God who has seen you all along. And I know this is a Baptist church, but I'm going to tell you, dance if you want to. Who cares? I'm serious. And the reason, because you don't have to dance to be seen, because you don't have to dance to be a show, because there's a God who dances over you, who delights in you. And so may we all stand with one another in this moment. May we lift our voices and may we declare praise to a God who has seen us all along. And may it be beautiful in this place this morning.
Within me feels dry. This is my prayer in my hunger and need. My God is the God who provides. And this is my prayer in the fire, in weakness or trial or pain. There is a faith brewed and more worth than gold. So refine me, Lord, through the flame. I will bring praise, no
week is that you know that God sees you and God is with you and goes before you. If you're new with us here today, we would love to meet you, love to see you right through the connection room over here. We have a 10-minute party. We'd love to meet you. Everyone else, have a great week. We'll see you right back here next week.